Kofi Kingston is finally going to WrestleMania, Kurt Angle's final match on Smackdown disappoints, and Charlotte Flair is the new Smackdown Women's Champion. Hello everybody, I'm Phil Cordemosh, and welcome to my Smackdown Live review. Smackdown this week was live in the Mohegan Sun Arena, and heading into the show, the big focus was going to be how is Kofi Kingston going to end up in the main event of WrestleMania. It came out earlier this week on social media. There was WWE advertisement that had already kind of spoiled the match happening, which most people already knew, but in terms of like the WWE machine, it had not been announced until there was advertisement that did show Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan confirmed for WrestleMania. So the show did open with the New Day coming to the ring, and Big E and Xavier Woods were teasing that they were going to leave the company after Kofi Kingston was once again robbed of his championship match last week. When what happened last week is Kofi Kingston won a gauntlet match where he was told if he wins that match, he gets in the main event of WrestleMania. Then Vince McMahon comes out and he says, you do go to WrestleMania if you win this match. And it was Daniel Bryan, and he had already gone through 5 opponents that he didn't have what it takes, and he lost the match. So Big E and Xavier Woods were saying they're going to quit. They call out Vince McMahon, but before McMahon can talk, Daniel Bryan, the WWE champion, comes out and just keeps going on and on about how Kingston's a B-plus player. When Vince finally does get the chance to talk, he calls New Day's bluff on quitting, and he says that Kofi Kingston is a B-plus player to him, but are Big E and Xavier Woods a B-plus tag team. So what he does tonight, he says, that they will have a chance to send Kofi to WrestleMania if they can win a tag team gauntlet match. Now, I do like what this does for the storyline. It does make sense in storyline to have the odds stacked against them again this week, but in terms of putting together a show, having back-to-back gauntlet matches where it's just multiple matches and really the fans are just waiting for that last match to happen, I wouldn't say it's a great idea. But like I said, in terms of the storyline, and I do like that they are sticking to what works best for the storyline instead of maybe what works best that week for the fans. It's a decision to make. And at the end of the day, at the end of the show, I think it was the right decision. But at this time, I was thinking this is not the way to do it. So another thing that happened this week is it was confirmed by WWE that the women's match for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania between Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair will be the main event, making it the first ever women's main event at a WrestleMania. Becky Lynch is backstage and she is being interviewed by Sarah Schreiber. And what Becky's saying here is she says she brings the people to the main event of WrestleMania. Ronda Rousey brings the Raw Women's Championship, but she asks, what does Charlotte Flair bring? And then we cut to the arena. Charlotte Flair's entrance music hits. Charlotte comes out in her ring gear and says that she will show Becky what she brings to the match. So what happens here is she's in her ring gear, so she's going to have a match. And then the SmackDown Women's Champion Asuka's music hits. And at this time I was thinking, oh no, they're going to have just a one-on-one match and Charlotte's going to beat Asuka in a non-title match. But no, they're in the ring, and the announcer, Greg Hamilton, says the following contest is for the SmackDown Women's Championship. The announcers don't know what the heck's going on. The fans are all shocked. Everyone's shocked. That Twitter was going crazy. How are we having a SmackDown Women's Championship match with Charlotte, who's already has a championship match at WrestleMania? But that's exactly what happened. And they did get a lot of time. This was a really good match for the time it lasted. It started out a bit slow before Charlotte started targeting Asuka's knee, which of course was set up for the figure 8 submission hold. And some of the big spots in the match, Charlotte goes for a moonsault but got caught in the Asuka lock. She was able to turn that over into a pin, but Asuka kicked out and then hit a roundhouse kick. Charlotte kicked out of that. The biggest spot of the match was both women are on the top rope, and Charlotte hits a Spanish fly for a great near fall. And Asuka was able to kick out of that, so Charlotte started getting frustrated that she couldn't pin Asuka in the match. So she started just kind of throwing punches from the ground before she got caught in a triangle choke. And Charlotte was able to power out of the choke and hit a sit-up sit-out powerbomb, and she went on to lock in the figure eight. Asuka tapped out. Charlotte Flair is the new SmackDown Women's Champion. I don't know when this decision was made. I don't agree with it at the end. Like, I understand the idea is now she does have something to bring to the match, and you have both of your women's champions in the main event of WrestleMania. So it looks good from a company standpoint. It does make the match a little bit bigger, add a little bit more, not star power, but a bit more importance to the match. But I don't think what it adds is that big compared to what this does to Asuka. I don't think this is good for Asuka. I think this kind of ruins this past 3 months where you had Asuka, who after last year's WrestleMania kind of fell off. She didn't really have a direction. And finally in December, she wins the SmackDown Women's Championship. She goes on at the Royal Rumble and actually beats Becky Lynch clean. She taps out Becky Lynch, who's in the main event of WrestleMania as well. And then it seemed when you had Charlotte and Becky in the Raw Women's Championship match, there was no one for Asuka to face. For this show tonight, it was actually advertised that it was going to be a fatal four-way to determine who would face Asuka for the championship at WrestleMania. But obviously that match didn't happen. But I don't think this is, at the end of the day, is going to be worth it unless after WrestleMania they have an idea where Asuka will get a rematch. And she probably will. But I think it would be okay to have another women's championship match on the show instead of just throwing both titles into the main event. But the other big part heading into the show, we're going to move on, was Kurt Angle versus AJ Styles. This was Kurt Angle's last match on SmackDown. Of course, he has a huge history with AJ Styles going back to Impact Wrestling. Their matches there. And before the match, AJ was interviewed, and he said he was honored to be Kurt's last match on SmackDown. So both men enter. They shake hands to start, and then Kurt Angle hits a German suplex right off the bat. He goes for the Angle slam right away, and AJ was able to counter that into the calf crusher submission hold. And Kurt sold this really well. It looked like he was about to tap out, but he was able to roll out of it. He locked in the ankle lock, and AJ rolled out of that. So both men are down. AJ stands up, turns around, and he gets RKO'd by his WrestleMania opponent, Randy Orton. And the match ends in a disqualification in about a minute. So the match was really good while it lasted, but it was a bit disappointing that you end it just so abruptly. It wasn't like it went... I guess if you're going to end a match by disqualification, maybe don't let it go so long. That was kind of the thinking there, and they didn't have a lot of time with the gauntlet match coming up. But it was very underwhelming, and it leads me to believe, because after the RKO, Kurt Angle hits Randy Orton with the Angle slam, which actually leads me to believe that this wasn't Kurt Angle's last match on SmackDown, and that next week it will be Kurt Angle versus Randy Orton, which, if you look at the way the company, they advertise one thing and then they do a totally different thing the next week. So it's very likely that he still will have one more match on SmackDown. But the next thing was The Miz came out for a WrestleMania proposition for his opponent Shane McMahon. So The Miz said he's going to rip Shane McMahon apart at WrestleMania after what Shane did at Fastlane, where he attacked him as well as his father in Cleveland. And he says Shane made it personal, and he wants to do as much damage as he can, so he wants a Falls Count Anywhere match at WrestleMania, which, if you look at Shane McMahon's highlight reel, it does lend itself well to a Falls Count Anywhere match. He will probably dive off of something, or, since he is now the bad guy in this story, maybe The Miz will dive off of something and do a Shane McMahon-like stunt to Shane McMahon. That's how I would book it if it was me, but I don't know if Miz wants to jump off of a really tall ladder or whatever it would be. But Shane does come out, and he has security as well as some of the lower-level WWE superstars. So you have Shelton Benjamin, Primo, and the three members of Sanity. And Shane once again makes Greg Hamilton give him an elaborate introduction like 2 weeks ago. And he actually says that the security is actually out here to protect The Miz from Shane, not the other way around. And he just goes on and on about how great it felt to beat up The Miz's dad. He accepts the Falls Count Anywhere match, keeps talking about Miz's dad. So Miz finally loses it, tries to go and attack Shane, but the security and the superstars are too much for him. He does brawl into the crowd with members of Sanity, which kind of builds up towards the Falls Count Anywhere match. So that was good. It went quick. I actually like this match. I like them as a tag team. It's a good match. I don't think it will go too long, and like I said, it will just be there to build up to whatever stunt Shane or The Miz does at WrestleMania. But that leads us to the main event, to the gauntlet match. So Xavier Woods and Big E come out, and their first opponents in the gauntlet match, the way a gauntlet match works is the New Day starts the match, and then a tag team, they'll face the tag team. If they win that match, they get another tag team, it goes on and on. That's what happened to Kofi last week with singles competitors. So their first opponents were Gallows and Anderson, which a lot of rumors going around that Gallows and Anderson are leaving WWE when their contracts expired, and that couldn't be more clear here. Even when they entered, they didn't even do the too sweet sign, which is what they usually do. And I would bet that maybe they were told they can't do that anymore, or it was some kind of way to show that they're on the outs. But if that wasn't enough, the New Day won this match in like a minute with the up, down, down finisher. It was really a nothing match. It was just there to maybe make it that New Day beat more people than 4. It was 5. So the New Day, they won quickly. Their next opponents were Shinsuke Nakamura and Rusev, 2 guys who also have really fallen off since WrestleMania last year, unfortunately. I'm hoping that maybe after WrestleMania they'll get a bit more attention as a tag team. But this match was a bit longer than the last one. They traded near falls. It was a lot of chin locks on Woods and Big E. But finally, the New Day hit the up, down, down again and got the pin. Then the third team was The Bar, and this took up the biggest chunk of this gauntlet match, and they just beat down on Big E and Xavier for a long time. A lot of chin locks, a lot of rest holds, and finally Big E tagged Xavier Woods, who made a comeback. Woods hit a leg drop for a near fall, and then it was back to the same kind of slow pace until finally Woods countered the white noise to roll up Sheamus and get the win. But then after the match, The Bar kept attacking them. They ended up putting Big E through a table. So the odds were really stacked against them heading into their next opponents, who were the Usos, the Smackdown Tag Team Champions. Which, at the time, I was thinking, this doesn't make any sense. Because if you watched the gauntlet match with Kofi Kingston last week, the people who were backstage with the New Day cheering him on were the Usos. But it did end up making sense by the end of it. They had the Usos grabbed the mic, and they talked about the respect they have for New Day, the battles and the rivalry that they had, and they said, we forfeit the match. So everyone's happy, except for Rowan and Daniel Bryan, who are trashing their locker room backstage, and that's because there's one more team that the New Day has to beat in order to send Kofi Kingston to WrestleMania, and that is Daniel Bryan and Rowan. And actually pretty quickly, Big E hit a big ending, which is his finishing move, on on Daniel Bryan, but Rowan broke it up. And then they go to the outside. Bryan tells Rowan to clear off the announcer table, and Rowan tried to slam Xavier Woods through the table like he did to Kofi Kingston last week. But Woods escaped. Big E sent Rowan over the table into the back area, where then he lifted up the announcer's table, dumped it on top of Rowan. They got back into the ring. The referee counts to 10, and the New Day win the gauntlet match, and Kofi Kingston is going to WrestleMania. So Kofi Kingston came out. They all celebrate. The locker room spills out into the arena, and they all celebrate for Kofi Kingston. Backstage, Vince McMahon is interviewed, and he confirms that it is indeed Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania. So overall, I thought this was a great episode of SmackDown Live. There was things I disagree with, but in terms of the entertainment aspect, the shocking title change was great for the show. You'd never know what to expect on SmackDown Live. That's what they pushed, I guess. And I would give this a thumbs up show. So thank you very much for listening. I'm just about out of time. For Spoke News, I'm Phil Cordemosh.